in this scenario, we have both a preferred and secondary contact. They both have salutation, and the first is male, second is female, and they have the same last name. So here we're using this field from the field set for outside. First cell, second cell, first whole name without cell. So if I look on this sheet, you see we are using another one of those fields that we added to the contact. So the formal contact outside test without cell, because we want the salutation to be the preferred contact salutation and secondary contact salutation, and then the preferred contact's whole name without the cell. So Mr. and Mrs. James D. Herring III. So that's why I'm reusing this formula from the contact field, because it's already there. So we know that this is right. We've tested this. So that is if the first name is not blank. If the first name is blank, then we do a different scenario, which is preferred contact, last name, and then the suffix. So that would be this scenario down here, Mr. and Mrs. Herring III. For the inside field, first cell, second cell, first last. This one is preferred contact salutation and secondary contact salutation last name. So Mr. and Mrs. Herring. So if we want to test this, we've got all these scenarios. Preferred is not blank, secondary is not blank, salutations are not blank, record types household or individual. Gender is, preferred gender is male, secondary gender is female. The last names are the same. And then we also have to put in these conditions here where the secondary is not Ms., right? Because then we'd want the names separate. So we don't want this condition to happen here to produce this result. Also, we don't want them to be both doctors, right? Because that's a different result altogether. And we also don't want the scenario where the secondary is doctor and the preferred is Mr., because if that was the case, then the secondary would be first, not the preferred. So we have to exclude all of these conditions. So we're going to set this up, and we're going to make the preferred contact first name not equal to blank in this scenario. So I've got this all set up here, and it reads Mr. and Mrs. David W. Dart Jr., Mr. and Mrs. Dart, which is exactly what we want. And down here, the formula field in the field set that doesn't have, or that does have a value is first cell, second cell, first whole name without cell. First cell, second cell, first whole name without cell. That's what I wanted to have happen. And the inside is first cell, second cell, first last, first cell, second cell, first last. Exactly what I would expect. So to me, this passed. Now the next scenario is everything's set up the same, except now the preferred contact's first name is blank. So in this case, it's Mr. and Mrs. Dart Jr., Mr. and Mrs. Dart. So it's just preferred contact, last name, preferred contact salutation, and secondary contact salutation. And then preferred contact, last name, and then the suffix. Forgot to add that part. So Mr. and Mrs. Herring III, Mr. and Mrs. Dart Jr., and then the inside salutation didn't change, Mr. and Mrs. Herring, Mr. and Mrs. Dart. So I would say that this passes all of these scenarios.